I'm David Eustace, and this is my wife Esther, and we were kind of instrumental in helping start this church. And we started out, when we moved back here, we went to the Nazarene church down in Fort Clark, and we were approached about starting a church up here in Beulah. So we decided to go with that and help out in starting this church. And when we got here, we started out, of course, meeting in homes and going that route to start with. And then we started looking for a building of some sort, and we ended up going downtown at the local restaurant. And we met in the basement. And when you think about a restaurant, what do you think about? People upstairs having a good time, and you start smelling the bacon and the eggs and the toast and the hash browns, and you have a tendency to forget about what the preacher is talking about and think about what's going on upstairs. So we got out of there. And from there, we went to the Baptist church. And the Baptist church, of course, had their services in the morning, and we had our services at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Now think about that. If you're a good Nazarene, Sunday afternoon about 2 o'clock, you're ready to take a snooze. So you're wanting to take that Nazarene nap, they call. So that makes it kind of difficult listening to the preacher when you're thinking about, oh, let's go home and go to bed. So anyway, we had to think about something else there, because that wasn't going very well. So the DS got this idea of a mobile chapel. And we got a 16 by 80?
70, I don't know.
Pretty good sized trailer house. It had a classroom on one end, classroom on the other end, bathrooms, and the middle section was sanctuary, and it had a little kitchenette on there. So we met there, started meeting there at a regular time on Sunday morning, which worked out pretty good. And we went through, Pastor Paul was our first pastor there, and Pastor Belzer came in next, and then Ron Kaiser came in after that. And while he was here, the decision was made to build this church.
The one thing I remember that really made an impression for me with Pastor Paul is he said, each one of us has a world, and only we can reach that world. And if we don't take care of our world, we've left a real hole in reaching others for Christ. And that has always meant so much, because if I'm not visiting and sharing and helping people in my world, I've lost what Jesus wanted me to do. Then when Pastor Ron and Marla Kaiser came, Pastor Ron was just a passionate person. He just was full of vim and vigor. And the church grew very rapidly during that time, and that is when we decided it was time we had to have more room.
Well, there was a friend of mine, Carla Beam. She kept inviting me to the church, and I was attending a different church at the time. And we had our youngest one baptized in the church that we were attending, and she had said, it's time. It's time to come to the church. I can remember when it was. It was September of 91. I remember her telling me what they did in their services, how it went. And she talked about the adult Sunday school class, and I'm like, adult Sunday school class? But I truly enjoyed it.
When we moved here 31 years ago, we were a young married couple. We had lived in Flasher for 2 years to start our married life together. I got offered a job here, and we're kind of excited because we bought a house in Hazen, and it was a block away from the Methodist Church. And we were pretty sure that we were just going to go there. I thought, how convenient, that's going to work out great. And sometime during that week, after we had moved here, we had a knock on the door, and we met Esther for the first time. She was working at school as well, and somehow she had heard that we had moved to the area and found out where we lived somehow, and showed up with a plate of cookies and an invitation to church. And I guess at that time we felt obligated to, here's a stranger brought me cookies, I think we have to go to that church.
It was Pastor Ron and Marla Kaiser who were pastoring here at that time, and we did just have a warm welcome from them and others in the church family too that first Sunday we came.
Well, Ron was the first pastor. I remember just a few funny things, but one thing that sticks out in my head is they were supposed to go to Dodge to get the pews for the church. And apparently it wasn't a very good trip. I actually was reading in some notes the other day how he said they ran out of patience and they ran out of gas. And I know they lost a couple pews on the way here, but so that was a pretty funny story.
When Paul and Mickey Decker were here, the thing that stands out to me was being in women's groups or gatherings with Mickey, and I think I learned a lot about parenting. Our first was just little when they were here, and just what the women talked about as far as raising their kids was something that made an impact on me and helped me in my child raising stage.
And I came to church here with my parents, who my dad was raised in the Nazarene church. So when we moved here and began going here, there was a sermon one day, and I answered the altar call that day and rededicated my life to Christ. And I'm going to cry. I remember my dad standing up and giving a testimony that to pray for your children every day, because this is what happens when you do. And then we were looking to get married, and Pastor Nail was the pastor here at the time, and he met with us and counseled with us, and then agreed to marry us with the stipulation of once he married us, we stayed married. And over the last 28 years, that's come up several times, like we can't. Pastor Nail said we had to stay married. And I believe we were the first wedding ceremony in this church back in 1997.
When Pastor Rick and Lorraine Van Wy were here, she went through some health issues, and so I remember at that time just the body gathering together and becoming closer as we prayed over them and as we kind of walked that journey with her.
I can remember when the DS had asked if the board ever thought of having Bruce and Renee as our pastor. I'm like, that would change our friendship. But it was a good change. Some things that I know, the baptisms at the lake, I can remember. At the motel, the baptisms, the pool, different things. Our lake services that we did.
So when we moved back here in 2005, our kids were 1 and 4, and we hadn't really decided on a church yet. So after we moved here shortly, like 3-4 weeks, Adam got in a 4-wheeler accident. And then I will just never forget when we were at the hospital in Minot, he was airlifted, and Bruce and Renee, they came to the hospital and just seemed really concerned, and you could, just, I don't know, made a good impression on me. And then when we, things kind of settled down after the accident, I just personally felt, and I think he did too, that this is where we belonged.
We tried out a bunch of different churches. Some churches had like awesome worship and dynamic preaching and blah, blah, blah. But one of the things that we really liked about this church was that it felt like a family. And the first person who introduced themselves to us was Esther. Surprise, surprise. I'm guessing that that's going to be a common theme with all these interviews. But I remember that. But I just remember I wanted to come back because it was, it felt like home. We just felt comfortable here. It was a small community, and we loved that it was small.
I started to come here, or we did, because of Rod and Robin Bremer. Robin was in my homemakers group along with Renee Schmidt, and we were having a function here. I think it was like an event where we had our husbands come for the homemakers, and she and I were doing something, and she said, "Do you have a church family?" And I said, "No." And I never really thought I would be back in an organized religious setting. But we came and continued to come. And I think through that, my faith was rekindled. And my love for Jesus has just grown in leaps and bounds. And I don't think if we hadn't had that experience of coming when invited, I don't know where my faith would be today.
Bruce and Renee were just super easy to talk to, easy to get along with. Bruce and I had a lot in common, I would think. So, no, it was a good time. We enjoyed them.
I think Bruce was, very easy to talk to and relatable. And I do actually have to say that, when he left, now our daughter, she's 21, and she's, choosing to, kind of find a church in Bismarck. And of course, she wanted to go where Bruce and Renee go.
I loved being on the worship team when Tim Transtrom was here, and Josh Chilcote and Renee on the piano, going too fast a lot of times. But we had such a fun time together, just again in community and just like being relational with each other. And our group went a few places together and played a few different gigs, and that was really fun. A lot of times we'd go out for ice cream to Dairy Queen after worship practice, and I loved that. We were so close knit, and that was a really special time.
Thing that kind of came out for me was that outreach program that we had down in Pine Ridge. And that was kind of interesting. We spent some time there, a couple days, did some projects there for the church. Felt good about it. They felt good that we were there working with them. And so that was good.
One of the most memorable times for me in this church was being part of a missions trip to Kyle, South Dakota on the Pine Ridge Reservation. A group of us went, and the preparation to get there and have the supplies that we needed, and the time there working for the things that the church needed there and hosting a vacation Bible school for the kids. It was just a real blessed time, and growing up on the reservation, for me, it felt kind of like a homecoming of sorts, and I just really have some fond memories of that trip.
What brought me to this church was I was invited by Brandy Odness. My kids were going to her daycare at that time, and I knew that I needed to get a connection back with God that I'd been missing in my life, and I needed to bring God into my kids' lives.
We really enjoyed it when Pastor Dan Sweeney was here. He had been the chaplain when Eric was on the fire department, so Eric had met him a few times. That was just kind of a time when I remember our teenage kids coming, and him just visiting with Jaden a few different times, and now Jaden's a paramedic and deals with like the chaplains and stuff, and I just think maybe that even opened an avenue for Jaden.
When Dan was pastoring, I remember his vibrancy and his emotion when he was preaching the message. I always enjoyed that.
Dan Sweeney came for that year when we were without a pastor. He was always there when we needed him, even though he had a full-time position in Bismarck. We were still his family, it seemed like, and he never seemed to miss a Sunday. Always tried to reach out to the congregation to make sure they were okay.
With Derek and Renee, I appreciate their honesty in everything. They have always been able to have a very blunt conversation with me, whether it's on parenting or marriage, anything else that I'm struggling with in my life. Whether I speak to them here at the church or I call them up personally at home, both of them are always willing to speak to me and counsel me.
When we came back, it just seemed like he kept growing and growing as far as stories are more relatable to this day and age, I guess. He likes the nerdy movies and whatnot, which is kind of funny. He likes all the technology and stuff. So, but he's been real good. He's definitely flourished since he's been here, I think.
I think he's very, I like his sermons because he's very relatable. When we had left and went to that other church, it was just a lot of just not current events, and just didn't feel like it really was making a difference in my life. And then I know too, when our kids come, they actually get something out of the sermon as well, because it is relatable to current events and, what's happening in your life, your family, kind of just is personal.
Yep.
And we appreciate that.
The Sins are just a loving family. They're just so thoughtful and always reaching out and thinking of us and just being there for us, just pouring into us any way they can. And I just also love coming and listening to Pastor Derek's sermons on Sunday mornings, just listening to what he has to say and what God has laid on his heart. I mean, some of his sermons are just kind of, fun, but they always have some great meaning behind it and very challenging. So I like to be challenged, and that's nice.
I do want to say that we appreciate our present pastor, Pastor Derek and Renee. Again, I appreciate the depth of the sermons, and I appreciate the faithful service that is just there, just keeps giving.
Being a part of this church is my family away from home. My family does not live in this area. It's difficult at times for me to get home to see my family or for them to visit. So there are members of this church that have become a second family to me.
We've stuck together through a lot of changes and a lot of people coming and going in large numbers, and the few of us that are still here from back when Bruce and Renee started are still here. And I don't know, I just think that's a testament to the strength we have in each other.
I think it's nice just to have, that being a smaller church, you just know that everybody prays for you. I know Dave and Esther are always just they've been there since I've been in high school. And, they both care a lot about us. I don't know, it's just nice to have that thought in the back of your head that people care, I guess.
Being part of this church is an opportunity to serve. Mm-hmm. Being a part of this church is an opportunity to have connections with people where you can be encouraged or encourage them, help them, receive help, be taught and grow, and use the skills that you have to, I guess in a variety of ways. So
So being part of this church just means being part of a community, being part of a family. They're there for you. You can lean on them. You know that they'll be there to pray for you and encourage you. Just even when they don't even know you're having a bad day, they just come up to you and talk to you and just pour into you. And it's just wonderful to be a part of a family and a community and just fellowship amongst other believers.
I think it just is a family. You don't, like if you're missing a service, people notice. You're not just a number walking in the door and then leaving. But that's my biggest thing is just a family.
Being a part of this church is being a part of the community, because this church isn't just about what goes on in here. The more I spend time with the people that go to this church, I see that they have tentacles going everywhere, and they know people all over town. They know that is ministry, and to me, that's kind of special too. And I come here on Sundays, and whenever we come together with great expectations of how God's going to use this church. I know God has something special for this church, and I love being here waiting to see how that's going to work out.